And good afternoon to all of our viewers. We want to take the opportunity to welcome you to another edition of Let's Talk, wherever you're listening from, whether you're listening on Second Advent Radio or you are on our Facebook, our YouTube channels, or you SLC Adventist or SLC Church channel. We welcome you to this edition of Let's Talk. We are continuing our discussion from last week. Last week, we started talking about the issue of ministering to those involved in crime and gang violence. And what an insightful discussion we had last week. We're going to be picking up that discussion this afternoon. Welcome from wherever you are across the Caribbean, around the world, to another edition of Let's Talk. Before we go any further, let's have a word of prayer. Eternal Father and our God, we pray that you will be with us as we go into this afternoon's presentation and discussion. We ask for your wisdom, for your guidance. Take full control and have your own way. In Jesus' name, amen. But friends, I did indicate last week that we have two very important guests with us in the person of Dr. Clive Dottin and Pastor Kendol Doyle. You may just want to know, just as a little refresher, Dr. Dottin is quite renowned. He is involved in religious liberty, public affairs. Has been involved in youth ministry, community outreach. He was appointed by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to as a member of the Murray Commission to investigate an allegation that there was a drug cartel in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. He also served as a special, is it Senator, Dr. Dottin?
Yes.
Yes.
Independent
senator in the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament. We are just delighted to have Dr. Dottin with us. Has been involved in a lot of rescue missions, rescuing individuals caught in gang violence. He is one known to have gone into the gang stronghold and somehow has the special ability to reason with those people. Dr. Doyle, Pastor Doyle, last week you learned that he is attached to the Royal Antigua and Barbuda Police Force in the area of the youth intervention program. He does counseling. He is currently pursuing a master's degree in the whole area of rehabilitation of young people who are caught up in criminal activities and the like. And those of you who were on last week would have heard how insightful his contribution was. If you missed last week, I really want to encourage you to, the entire presentation is on YouTube. You can always go and check it out and listen to last week, because we don't have time to go over everything we shared last week. We have a lot more to talk about, but I just thought it's really important for you to get the information that was shared last week. Now, to our guests, Pastor Doyle, Dr. Dottin. Last week, we looked at the whole issue of what we mean when we say gangs. We looked at the whole concept of the impact of the absentee father on and people getting involved in gang. We looked at the whole idea. We spoke towards the end of the program. I suffered an internet blackout towards the closing scenes of last week's program, but we spoke to the issue of female involvement in gangs. And I want to move from there. I want to begin this afternoon by asking, now, gangs can be very powerful. And I've heard of situations where contractors have had to get permission from gang lords before they can enter territory to do work that they have been contracted to do. How concerned should members of society be that a new gang you know, you may have a gang that is demonstrating, maybe they are at a primitive level, quote unquote primitive, but I really mean to say that they're not very sophisticated. They don't have high-tech machinery and weaponry. Maybe they're using cutlasses and knives and the like. But how concerned should members of society be that such a gang can move from that stage to become the real powerful force that can dictate living conditions in an area?
Well, if I pass the Doyle and Dr. Greene, if I could start the ball rolling,
sure.
That is so in a number of countries. In fact, this morning in church in San Fernando, a conference administrative assistant told me a second brother died. The first brother died because of that same control that they exhibit. And anybody who tries to break that control, all right, is eliminated. I think the Caribbean is experiencing a brain drain and a huge capital flight as a result of the power of gangs. For example, let us look at the issue of coward tax. Coward tax is a major issue. We had an Adventist couple who paid $250,000 last year, you know, because of the extortionists, and they had to leave. We are working in an area right now with 15 groups, including the police youth club, all right, and other groups in the community. And I could tell you some of the businessmen that say, we're not taking this, we're not paying any more coward tax, so we are gone. So actually, what you have is that a number of these gangs have become so powerful, they're better armed than the police, all right? They extort money from businessmen. Contracts, let me tell you something. There's some areas in Trinidad and a couple other islands whereby you have to, and what is dangerous is that they go to the politicians when the contractors tell them they don't really have a job for them, they're not budgeted for, and the politicians send them back and tell the contractors, you have to employ. In one area, I know 25% of the staff, all right, have to consist of gang members. That is how bad it is. And the politicians play into that narrative. So I want to say that we should be very concerned. Now, part of the challenge with gangs are armed. You hardly have gangs that are not armed. When I say armed, armed with sophisticated weapons, AK-47, pump action, Magnum spiral, you know, barrel guns, all right? And now we have the AR-15. To my mind, I am exceptionally worried about the AR-15. It's the most powerful weapon in the world. And a lot of gang leaders have accessed that in the region. So we should be very concerned.
Yes, Pastor Doyle, you want to add something to that?
Yes, good afternoon, Dr. Dottin. Good afternoon, Dr. Greene, and the wider community. Good afternoon. It's a beautiful thing to be again back in this space to discuss what is trending. As we know, crime and violence is trending across the Caribbean basin and across the world. And we look at the network that is fueling our crime and violence, and also that is exploiting for wealth. And when we talk about gangs, it's a known fact now that gangs affect the entire structure that we are part of. And so our society definitely needs to be concerned. It affects it affects us economically, it affects us socially, it affects us spiritually, it affects the political dimension. Because last week when we look at the construct of gangs, we said that a gang is not an ordinary structure. It's a very complex structure because it involves more than just young men gathering on a block. It involves every strata of society. And we highlighted last week that what we see on the tier in terms of the gang members, the teenagers and so forth, they're just tools by a more organized structure, which is comprised of, political figures, folks in the medical field, folks in the legislative field, and across the spectrum. So as Dr. Greene asked that question, certainly persons should be concerned, because what is happening today is the copycat syndrome, because these folks in gangs, some of them might be what we call illiterate, but they're very good with common sense. And also, when they get into gangs, they have been trained the ropes of gangs based on successes in the past in neighboring countries, neighboring villages, neighboring islands. And today, because gang warfare is trending, a lot of our young people, with the exposure to the internet and the exposure to the social media, they are learning and learning fast. And so when they look at maybe Guatemala, or they look at probably Jamaica, or they look at maybe Nicaragua, and they realize how folks are manipulating the existing structure in terms of maybe the construction industry, maybe in the business field, how they can provide services for and get money, how they can provide service for and get favor. These gang members are capitalizing. And so in our Caribbean basin, we have to be concerned. For example, we are driven heavily by tourism, and we should be concerned about the rising gangs and gangs warfare within our community. It affects our education system, it affects the family structure, it affects everything that we do. And the truth is, our gang and gang members have become more emboldened because they're seeing the success of others, and they're now applying what they have learned on the social platform and via networking to be successful. So we definitely need to be concerned as Caribbean Islands, where it is not a dominant or strong factor. We need to be concerned because it is going to get there. Primarily simply because gangs are no longer functioning in villages. It's a network. So we have members who might be in Antigua, but they have links in Jamaica, they have links in Trinidad, they have links in St. Lucia, they have links in St. Vincent. And as a result of that, we cannot take it lightly anywhere we are, because they're becoming more organized and they're reaping success.
So I think we last week established the fact that the parental element is so important. Towards the second half of this program, we're going to really zero in on intervention strategies. But before we get there, I have a question I want to ask. This is, I guess, to some extent controversial if politicians are listening. Around the Caribbean and maybe the world, I should say, there has been a recent move to decriminalize cannabis, marijuana. Many countries have adopted this position. It appears that the blatant use of marijuana, I'm saying it appears, I don't have any scientific facts, so I'm asking, but it appears that the blatant use of marijuana has resulted in an increase of emotional issues. And some even believe that in combination with other drugs, such as alcohol, it can lead to uncontrolled behavior. I've had situations where individuals have been brought to me to provide intervention for individuals as a result of marijuana use. This is no fairy tale now. This is real experience. Since we have decriminalized marijuana, there has been a number of young people who need emotional help, coping mechanisms and strategies, and I've been asked to intervene. So my question is there a link between marijuana use and gangs and crimes?
I am watching my internet capacity. So I will jump into the arena, Dr. Doyle. And if you see me disappear, I'll try and get onto my phone. All right? So I'm comfortable from my laptop now. I don't know how long I will last. Let me say this. There is a tremendous link in terms of cognitive impairment. And I'll come back to that. Because for a long time, it was felt. And by the way, I want to tell you, Dr. Greene, those who have opposed marijuana, even scientists, have been demonized. That is where the world is. To my mind, the world believes if we can't solve it, legalize it. And then the problem will go away. That is almost bizarre psychotic thinking. In Trinidad, I've heard our Minister of National Security say they will have to have a rethink on this. Before I go to the biological impact and the psychological impact, let me deal with the business of marijuana. Now, when I was in Jamaica in 2014, I remember when they wanted to legalize it, two young Rastafarian planters says, there goes our business. because the big business will invest more and reduce us to slaves, all right, in the plantations, in the ganja plantations. And what you will have is more murder. Now, in Trinidad specifically, let me tell you what has happened. In Trinidad, you allowed the families and allowed about 4 plants, right, in the backyard. So who is counting? And you have some extended families, and every family allowed 4. So what has happened is that the law now has facilitated the mass production of pushers. And the original pusher who had control of the market is almost now sidelined. So that what you have happening, an increase in pushers, but a decrease in turf acreage. If you understand where I'm coming from. So that has created a problem because you have more people legally now competing for the same space. So that is a challenge. So that has resulted in a number of murders. I am not guessing. I am telling you. That has resulted in more murders. Number 2, I accuse our universities of paying lip service to research on marijuana and the brain. For years now, West German Dr. Adam Solskowski has spoken about, young people, relatively younger people suffering from Alzheimer's disease. All right? He has spoken about that. Dr. Gabriel Nehas in New York State Medical University talks about marijuana impact on the white blood cell. There's a white doctor who is alive in Trinidad, Dr. Peter Gentle. He talks about the destruction of the white blood cell. So that is nothing new. Now we have a Japanese expert who is the #1 DNA cellular expert in the world, Dr. Akira Morishima, and talks about the damage to the DNA done by the marijuana. And now we have Dr. Jody Gilman, who is talking about the impact on the nucleus accumbens. All right, we know about the hypothalamic region, we know about the amotivational syndrome. And she is saying the centers in the brain to deal with learning, emotions, and dreaming, all right, in terms of plotting like a career pathway, are being significantly damaged by the marijuana. Now, one last guy is Dr. Mark Gold. Dr. Mark Gold says, as the perceived dangerousness of a drug goes down, its usage goes up. Now, that to my mind is damaging revelation. Not only that, those who have printed about the negative uses of marijuana are now attacked by their fellow scholars, all right, and by people in the wider community, and by politicians who are saying as much ado about nothing. You can't stop it now. So it's best if you can fight them, join them. That is what is being said right now. And I am saying that it's time our universities step forward, all right, whether it's KFIL, whether it's Mona, whether it's St. Augustine campus, whether it's UTT, whether it's USC, step forward on this issue. There's abundance of literature, all right, that speaks to the issue of the damage to the critical parts of the brain and the damage emotionally too. So that we have the evidence, it is there. I listened to 2 guys this year from Jamaica, 2 experts, and they're saying they don't recommend, and they're not Seventh-day Adventists, they're not even Christians. They're at Mona, and they're saying they don't recommend ganja for recreational use at all. Anytime you burn that stuff, what is happening? You have what is called a molecular reconfiguration of the stuff inside there. So that I want to say that there's the evidence, and governments and scholars and others have been very slow to share this information. When we legalize this thing, we should have been given or decriminalized, which is almost the same thing. We should have an education program, all right? A massive education program. We should have invested a lot of money to go school by school to show the young people the dangers of this stuff. So I think the politicians have dropped the ball, all right? The scholars have dropped the ball. The church has dropped the ball, because I believe via the Pathfinder Club that Ian Greene talks a lot about, we should have been really been on the road explaining and educating the masses.
Now, before you come in, Pastor Doyle, I think one of the challenges here is that, there are lots of people who do not understand the difference between decriminalize and legalize, so that in the minds of lots of young people, they conclude, okay, it's legal now, and they see it as having license to smoke where they want, when they want, how they want. And unfortunately, a lot of people have just concluded, well, it's available now. It's like a cigarette. We know cigarette has its own challenges, but they're thinking it's like a cigarette. And I've seen people walking down the road with a joint, as they call it, in their hands, and that's it. And
nobody touching them. Nobody touching them.
nobody's interfering with them, and that is one of the challenges. Yes, Pastor Doyle.
Yeah, a number of things. One, in terms of you talk about the business of the business of drugs and the decriminalization. It is a very sensitive topic, and I am very much careful as to what I say here. But when we look at the Caribbean basin, especially some of the Caribbean islands, I would not want to call name, but we probably know that are driven heavily by tourism. You want have to understand and ask oneself why the tourists move, and when they move, what they move for. A lot of tourists in times past, when they move for recreation, and part of that, well, still part of the recreation, the smoking cannabis was part of that, and is still part of that. And so we see a lot of islands that are driven by tourism now making it more accessible. So when you decriminalize, you're saying, okay, only a certain amount is allowed. For example, 15 grams, I think, for Antigua, 4 trees, making accessible for general use is also lending towards the tourism product. So we must understand that. I'm not saying this is what led our prime ministers to do that, but it drives behind the scene why decisions are making. For example, in our Caribbean islands, we see them making access gambling. So to meet the tourism product, to meet the needs of the tourists, then you see gambling. We talk about alternative lifestyle, legalization of homosexuality. So there are a number of things that drive governments to change laws and to coin laws. So this could be, I'm not saying it is, it could be one of the reasons why, they may have gone that way. But we must also note that what is the term medical marijuana, the marijuana that is used, or the cannabis that is used for, the medical purposes, is normally not the cannabis that is being sold on the street. And I think that is where, it compounds the issue. And a number of times when folks would have planted the marijuana and harvested the marijuana, it is mixed with other drugs. And this is what is normally called the destruction of our young people. But making accessible drugs to a young mind, an undeveloped mind, is really too much. And I think that's what we're seeing with our young people. They have access to it, and that is causing them to do that. But we know marijuana, what it does, it affects short-term memory. It affects your cognitive ability to make decisions. And young people going through the developmental stages, we're told that the brain of a young person is fully developed at age 25. And we're seeing teenagers and pre-teenagers and using this substance. The brain is not fully developed, and the substance alters their brain, alters their motor skills, and as a result of that, they're making so many bad decisions when they're manipulated by the whole system that seeks to advance the gangs at their cost.
Well, marijuana is just one drug, I mean, there are others. One of the interesting things about gangs, as I understand it, is that a lot of people find security. When you talk about people who come from broken homes, we spoke last week about the absentee father and individuals who have been shamed by society, maybe by their own relatives, individuals who have become demotivated because there is no positive role model in their lives. And they go to the gang, and the gang leader perhaps gives them money, gives them assurance. Listen, this is family here. You're going to get safety here. We're going to protect you. But then they're drawn into a certain culture. And I'm trying to make the connection between drugs in general and gangs, because when you take care of somebody, when you give them what they ask for, that finance has to come from somewhere. So where do gangs get the money from that they are able to use to live, to support their followers, etc.?
All right. Let me get into the gangs in the region. Okay, because books written that we use in a lot of our texts at the tertiary level comes out of America and England. And a lot of the American books focus on California, which is the known Sodom and Gomorrah for gangs, apart from other things. Now, let us be careful as you watch this. There was a time when you had specialized gangs. You had a gang that dealing with execution. All right, they're paid by powers that the criminal syndicates. They execute people. They don't have to know them. They just want to kill, but they're paid to kill. Then you had the gambling gangs. All right, the guys that infiltrate the casinos and what have you there. And then you had the gangs who just involved in crime and violence. What I have seen in the Caribbean is a merger of this specialized group. So the lines are blurred now. So you have the gangs, and most of the gangs, I would say, 90% of the street gangs are fueled by the gang trade, by the drug trade. Most of them, I would say 9 out of 10, all right, are fueled by the drug trade. All right. And marijuana is the most, because we plant marijuana here. We import cocaine, but we plant marijuana. And I hate to tell you this, but the security services, you have a significant portion of our police services, those who have armies, etc., who are in with the gangs. They benefit from the gangs. They protect the gangs. Some of our police protect murderers in some parts of the region. And this is one thing that governments are pulling their teeth out without anesthetic, and they hear, but it's difficult to solve, because when those who are supposed to fight for you are fighting against you, you have a problem. So that I am saying to you, Dr. Greene, that the majority of our gangs, they get their money from killing, and they get their money from being involved with the drug trade. All right, I am putting my head on a block, but at least 80% of the funds come from the drug trade. If you have to deal with gangs, you have to deal with the drug trade.
Now, yes, Pastor Doyle.
Yeah, you know what? Yes, research have proven what Dr. Dottin has just said has to be true. Because we realize that most gangs they started in ghettos, in underprivileged environments, and we did say that poverty, folks born into poverty, they're predisposed to find themselves in gangs. Persons who are part of violent environment called home, they predisposed to find themselves in gangs, because what gangs do is that gangs provide, you know, a response to the basic needs. So poverty, they would give you, you know, handouts. If you were abused, they provide a sense of trust, they protect you, and so it makes it easy for someone to move into gangs. Dr. Dottin would be aware of this experience that happened in the early 90s with Doyle trading in Trinidad. You know, that's where my interest became, you know, heightened in terms of dealing with investigating about gangs. Doyle trading was a drug pusher, and his members killed, I think, the Babulal family, Dr. Dottin, and as a result of that, you know, his entire group was harmed in Trinidad. But one of the things that they discovered in the Piparo area where Doyle was established is that Doyle took care of the needs of the folks in the community. Folks who were poor, he took care of their needs, and as a result of that, he gained their loyalty. So I just want to say that, listen, that the folks who are in charge of gangs, who are in charge of the drug trade, they want you know, footmen. They want folks to be upfront, because these persons who are pushing the drugs, they don't want to go to prison, and they must use someone else to do that. So we see they capitalize on poverty, on dysfunctions, and they use these persons. So drugs is what is pushing heavily our gangs in the Caribbean basin, and marijuana, as Dr. Dottin says, because we grow it, it is readily available, but there are lots of other drugs that gangs would use. And I really want to highlight the point that Dr. Dottin mentioned, is that because our Caribbean basin is becoming more corrupt and linked to the international drug trade, we having folks who have been contracted to be hitmen. So we can't overlook that. A number of gang members, they are not, some of them, they don't push drugs, they don't carry drugs, they are just hitmen. For example, they might be contracted from Jamaica, and then they come to Antigua, or contracted from Dominica, and they move to Trinidad. So when they land in Trinidad, they already have their airfare out, they commit their crime and they move. So it's a complex thing that we need to really study heavily in terms of as we look at it. But you know, the moving of marijuana, arms, and even good products. Because Dr. Greene, I want to say that some of these gangs they involve in disguise. So this guy says they would have legitimate businesses. So they may go into farming, they may go into some legitimate businesses to provide a cover-up so that when law enforcement men and women are looking and investigating, they see the legitimate business. But behind the scenes, the hardcore jobs, the hardcore killing, the hardcore guns are behind there. So we need to note that as well.
So a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Dottin, just let me squeeze this in. So a couple of weeks ago, when I heard in the news, for example, that this Trinidad performing artist went to St. Martin to perform, and then outside his hotel one night he was gunned down. It's likely that may be a hitman dealing something there, because you come to do a show, you sing a song, you get into your vehicle to go somewhere, and you get gunned down. That seems almost too random. If I follow what you're saying, I'm not saying that was the case in this particular situation, but these things do happen.
Okay. Another case, let me just add, what you're saying is so true. Let me just add something quickly in terms of the trade and the complexity of the hierarchy of it and how it functions. For example, in the drug trade, you must be able to sacrifice of yourself in order to advance. You must be able to appease law enforcement to advance. So, for example, there is the movement of two shipment of drugs or ammunition. One is of the value of $1 million, one is of the value of 10,000. What they will do is synchronize the landing or the arrival of these drugs. So while the law enforcement men and women get the tip for the drugs coming through the seaport, and all of the resources channeled towards the seaport, the attention, the media, the CID at seaport, there is a free passage at the airport of the drugs worth $1 million. So yes, there is a capture here, there is an arrest here, there is a success here, but at the airport, there is the greater quantity that is supported by the whole hierarchy to ensure that the custom officers are there, everybody's there to get it through smooth passage. So what happened in St. Martin? It would be something like that. Who knows? But it is very, very prevalent today in the whole gang warfare and the structure that uses gangs to advance its cause.
Dr. Dottin?
Let me say 5 things. There's a Jamaican artist. We don't know Vibes Cartel got out, right? To the legal route. And I heard a commissioner of police in Jamaica say he was involved in several murders and he get off with this. A Jamaica commissioner of police said that. Now, I want to stress on this because I know prime ministers and we have ministers of government listening this evening. The gangs have formed a Caribbean alliance, and the dancehall artist is a big part of it. In fact, I have from significant security contacts. I have major contacts, and I have heard from my sources that a dancehall artist in Jamaica is playing a significant role and moving his resources around the region. So I said last week, and I'm saying it again, we have a group that I call CMAS, Caribbean Mafia Networking Alliance Strategy. That is what you have, all right? And it's time that CARICOM gets off its chairs and its lovely presidential suites and begins to look at the gang culture and the drug culture have outclassed us. They are ones who are having the migratory criminal to Port Lila, Ramdeen from Trinidad, the Catholic Social Justice Commission. They're moving around the islands. I have evidence, solid evidence that there are gangs in Trinidad recruiting in St. Lucia, for example. There are gangs in Jamaica recruiting in Antigua, if you please. There are gangs all over from Guyana to Trinidad to St. Vincent, all across. And I am saying to you, if they could be recruiting, we should be recruiting too for positive mainstream society. Now, I want to tell you quickly, because I'm watching my strokes on my computer there. I believe the church should launch a mega drug prevention program. The church has a program called Youth Alive, and I'm recommending that every Pathfinder club, that should be integrated. It's a long time the Pathfinder club begging for restructuring, all right? Because you have young people, Pathfinder age and younger, who in gangs, who using guns like if they are experts in the mafia. So I
Well,
am saying
I wanted to, I know you're in a hurry, but the Lord is going to sustain that battery in the computer. So
yes.
let me just, before you get into, because that's where we're going to. But you know, when Pastor Doyle spoke just now, he mentioned, you know, for example, the drug lord who took care of the needs of the people in the community, because that community was an underprivileged community.
Sure.
So people may come away thinking that only underprivileged children get involved in gangs. What about the innocent person? You know, this person is a good, decent middle class or upper class child going to maybe a private school or something to that effect. Are we in danger of missing these kinds of people, and how do these kinds of
All right.
people get pulled in?
Let me come to that. Let me say one word about that. There are prestigious schools in Trinidad with middle class and upper class people who flood in with drugs. I want to say that with authority, so that there's a middle class drug user and drug dealer, and of course, the drug trade is controlled by the rich. They're the ones who import the cocaine. Those are the millionaires. And I am saying, if we have to deal with crime comprehensively, we have to deal with those who import in the cocaine, for example. And some of them are importing the cocaine in the secret societies. They are campaign financiers. So that is a major, major challenge. So that while we focus on the guys and the poverty and thing, at the other end of the spectrum, the owners of the drug trade are really the rich and the famous. And we have to say that. And we have to speak truth to power here, because that's a major issue.
All right, interesting. So let's now go to the whole matter of how do we provide meaningful intervention. Gang activity not only impacts the individual members, it can also serious impact on society. We spoke about the economic impact, especially for some of our Caribbean territories that are heavily tourism based in terms of economy. So how do we minister to those involved in gangs? I want to talk about two things. We want to provide meaningful intervention because we want to rescue people. We want to be able to capture, so to speak, some of those individuals who are caught up in the whole idea. And at the same time, we want to also talk about mitigation strategies. So how do we prevent individuals from sliding into it? So on the one hand, individuals who are already in it, and then individuals who have the potential to get involved.
Okay, we said last week we look at the risk factors, and we talk about risk factors versus protective factors. And we said risk factors are those factors that will cause persons to more likely do negative behavior, poverty, exposure to crime. And we talk about the protective factors being those factors that will cause an individual to lean more to positive decision making, positive actions. So what we need to do is to address the risk factors and the protective factors simultaneously. And we see the home is a player, the school is a player, the church is a player, and the community is a player, because both of them can provide either the risk factors or the protective factors. You know, I'm presently here in Jamaica. I'm at the Youth of Vision Academy, and it's a school, a boarding school that, you know, give therapy to young people who are going through different issues. Some who are in gangs, some would have been exposed to drugs, some who would have, been abused as when they were young. And so that's what this school is seeking to provide therapy. And right now they have close to between 150 students and a staff of over 200 persons. I use that as an example to say that, listen, the drug trade is a multi-billion-dollar trade. Multi-billion-dollar trade, and the response that would impact that and turn our young people must be an effort that involves lots of resources, and our physical resources or financial resources. So it's not just something that we can solve by talking. It is not just something that can be solved by prayer and by Bible study. There must be something that's comprehensive, something that address all the factors. And when we speak of the church has a significant role to play, because the church is part of the protective factor. The church is comprised of the community members, is comprised of key leaders in the community, as well as the home. We said earlier that when young people are not abused and they are illiterate and they are part of the poverty belt, then they're predisposed. So what the church needs to do is to be able to meet that needs. And I'm very much sure that if we were to, sit down and look at the demographic that we see being affected, and we come up with strategies, we can. But the church, number one, I'm going to give two. Number one, the church has to provide spiritual guidance. And we talk about, having our young people to develop a standard of living, meaning what guides their choices, what guides their decisions, what shape their consciences. Yes, we got to shape the consciences of our young people. What guides that dopamine rush? What guides them to be happy? And I believe in the church focuses on that. And then we must look at how we can create what the drug pushers create, what is being created by the gang leaders. We talk about a community of belonging, because our young people, they feel comfortable on the block. They feel protected. Their needs are being met. And so the church needs to become a community that fosters, community and a sense of belonging, where our young people feel appreciated, they feel loved, they feel valued, they feel that they can trust. And I think if we do that, these are two components that we can use that will work. Spiritual guidance, where the conscience stays at a shape. And number two, we create a sense of community and belonging, so that they can talk freely and they can be vulnerable. And while they're vulnerable, they can be protected and not manipulated.
Okay, thank you so much. Pastor Dottin, before you respond, I just checked the messages, and some folks are saying that your volume is a little low. So if you can raise your voice a little bit for us, that might help us. All right, you're muted right now. You're muted. You're muted, Pastor Dottin. Unmute, please. Okay.
Yes, I'm going to go loud here. Number one, we have to have community awareness programs. We have to have community awareness programs, and we must challenge in a respectful way where gangs have taken over our society. So we need to have the community awareness. But I want to say the Pathfinder Club must be expanded and restructured, and we must integrate, the Youth Alive program, which is a drug prevention program. The New Start program, our health directors must use the New Start program in schools and in street corners. All right. Number three, the issue of having support groups. And I would opt for zonal support groups, because as Elder Doyle said, some of these things will take a lot of resources. So I'm saying districts must come together. I believe every conference should have at least one rehab center for the drug trade, and at least a major support group for gang members who wish to come out of gangs. Now, gangs are difficult, complex thing, simply because the gangs, are armed. That's why we run away from them. Okay? The other thing is this. I feel every church district should adopt the community. But we have to get radical here. Religious liberty and public affairs must come in. We cannot solve the problem alone. So we should unite with other churches and adopt communities. That's a hard sell for some Adventists and for some other folks too, because we feel as ecumenical. We have got to join up with other church groups, Pentecostals, Baptists, Catholics, and form what I call community adoption ministries. We have got to deal with the drug dealer and the gang leader. We have got to deal with his followers and disciples. And of course, we have got to deal with the young addicts below and the young fellows who are being mentored. As I say mentored, I believe every church should have a mentorship program. Every church should have a mentorship program. And if you want to expand it into the community, invite the other members of the community who may not be Seventh-day Adventists. I believe in our media programs right now, we should invest heavily in helping young people to say no to drugs and teach them. There's a model the church has called the health affection model, health affective education model. I believe we should get involved in that. Yes, via the Pathfinder Club. Yes, via the Master Guide Club. Yes, via the Youth Society. And I feel more youth societies must have more youth education programs against these scourges on a Sabbath evening, because what will happen eventually, we will see our churches becoming irrelevant. People will see us as irrelevant. So let me go again. Support group ministries, institutions. Every conference should have at least one foundation. which is a legally incorporated entity that deals with several issues in the community, and you will get funding for that. I believe we should have rehab institutions. We should have support groups, and that wouldn't cost a lot of money. We should have some specialized support groups, and of course, community awareness programs.
Pastor Greene, I need to highlight a point. The point that I want to highlight is that, remember, we established earlier that the gangs provide more than just emotional support. They provide financial support. They pay some of the bills. Some of the gangs send folks to school. So we have to have a focus, or be the church, the government, or whatever jurisdiction, a replacement, because it just providing technological help in terms of the knowledge base, try to enhance the knowledge base. It does not pay their bills at the end of the month. It doesn't pay house rent. It doesn't pay school fees. It doesn't buy Pampers for those gang members who are children. It does not provide for them to go to the next fete or the next carnival or the next what. So these needs are still there. So while we're talking about rehabilitation, while we're talking about addressing their softer skills, we have to understand there's some real bills to pay. So the church must be willing to budget for this as well. So while we're talking about the journey of rehabilitation, where we get them changing their behavior, we must be able to do that. And it's something that is critical here, because as law enforcement and other powers, negotiate with gangs, we have to be aware that a part of these negotiation, a part of these intervention comes with a high cost, because how are these gang members going to maintain their lifestyle? Because just giving them a doctrine or giving them prayer, it does not solve their everyday needs. So our address have to have a practical slant. And you will often hear people say, Pastor, I'm not giving a drug pusher my money. I'm not giving this my money. But if we're talking about rehabilitation, we have to sit down and understand that in negotiating with them, in communicating with them, in the rehabilitation process, we must put money on the table in terms of getting food to them until they're able to benefit from the training, from the skills that we pass on. But I think this is very integral in negotiating with the gangs, in trying to address the issue. Some persons may not like this approach, but it has to be a part of the approach as well.
Well, let's listen to something that Pastor Dottin said a little earlier, because he spoke about the integration. We cannot say we're going to do it alone. We don't want to share this idea with anybody else, because we want to get the glory, so to speak. And we have to come to the place where we recognize that we can't. Now, there's a very important element that I don't want us to miss, because was it this year or was it last year? I can't remember when. Might have been last year. When I looked at what was happening in our territory, from a church perspective, we realized that it was important to deal with some intervention strategies. And we organized to bring Dr. Chaitin. Dr. Chaitin is an interventionist who has a very good track record of creating positive change with gangs and individuals, communities, etc. And we brought him here to do a series, which was by all means very impactful. I went to various schools with him. We went to the prison, we went to the police headquarters, etc. And he was willing to come back, and stay maybe for a year, for 3 months. But here what the gangs have that we don't necessarily have, right? They deal with drugs, so they get a lot of money. But these kinds of things are pretty expensive. So we, as a church, we can't do it alone. So we need to reach out and maybe say to the government, hey, listen, this is what we have in mind. Can you partner with us? I think governments need to come to the awareness that investing in intervention is not something they should say, oh, this is too much money. Because what we want at the end of the day is change lives. If we are not careful, society can go downhill so quickly that our nation develops a kind of reputation that is not good for it. But I thought I would share that. But when I listen to both of you, I realize that the church already has, the Seventh Adventist Church already has a lot of structures in place. You know, we already have a Pathfinder Club that does meaningful ministry. You know, Pastor Dottin, you mentioned that, you know, we do need to do some reform, and that is true because times are changing and we have to update, we have to modify, we have to become more relevant. We have a society called Women's Ministry. What about you mentioned support group? You know, so many women in our societies who need assistance with how to parent children. I heard on our news this week, somebody attached to the hospital, the public hospital, that there is a concern because 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds are giving birth. And the young lady said sometimes when she calls these individuals' parents, she's shocked to discover that they're twice her age. Now, if you have a 12-year-old and the mother is twice that age, that's 24. So last week when I was alarmed at grandparents at 30 and 26, we're talking about grandparents at 22 and 21 and 24. So our women's ministry can do meaningful intervention. And the church has a lot of structure, but we do need to realize that we have a responsibility to serve our community. I do agree with that.
Well, Elder, I want to say we have plenty of structures that don't follow the Good Samaritan model. So that I think we have the structures. Now, Elder Doyle, we could never compete against the income of the gang leaders and drug dealers. Huh? Yeah. We can never compete. However, we can help, and we could get the government institutions to also help. But I feel any money we invest should be through a significant adoption program of the young people involved in gangs who need to be redirected, get back to school. Right now, I'm trying to get some young people who have been exposed to gangs back to school, taking evening classes, if the secondary system will not accept you. So I think that is a major issue that we have to look at. But I think we have structures, but I don't think a lot of our structures and groups are relating to the crises in the community. It comes like a nice in-house club. And I am going to have to leave you all in about 2 minutes. But I just want to say we have to make the structures we have. But I am not seeing too many mentorship programs. I want to make a plug for mentorship.
Well, Pastor Dottin, may I tell you something that Southwood Conference has done? I made reference to it in the Police Week service today. But we have a program called Black Boys Can. It was initiated by our Children's Ministries Director, Dr. Yulali Semper. And recently we celebrated our 10th anniversary, where we provide mentors for Black boys. And the idea about Black Boys Can is a demonstration, to put purpose in the lives of these individuals. And 10 years ago, a few weeks ago, rather, I may have said it wrong, a few weeks ago, months ago, when we had our 10th anniversary, when we look at those individuals who started 10 years ago, many of them are university graduates, many of them own their own businesses, many of them are making meaningful contributions. So these are things that a church is doing. But before you go, Pastor Dottin, I know you wanted to talk about schools. What can our schools do? And I really want for us to end with that. We don't have time to go beyond that, but what can our schools
do? I feel, Elder, that Black Boy Initiative is a great initiative. I think we as a Caribbean church should come together and share these initiatives. I feel the French River Group has done an excellent job. Our gang group in Trinidad, COP, that Tobago is now going to adopt in some other conferences, where we look at the young gang member and give them positive alternatives and work with them as mentors. I feel that's a serious thing. But I want to say, Dr. Greene, if the church thinks we can survive in a climate of the drug culture and gang culture without being consistent and meaningful and expand it, and put resources inside of it, then we are fooling ourselves. And I feel as a union, we have to be very specific. I think our health department and youth departments have to look at some innovative programs and ministries. I may not say programs, but ministries and projects to reach out to those who are hurting, and apparently nobody is really concerned about them. I could tell you the murder rate is too high in some of our countries, and a lot of young people are being killed. Young people as young as 5 years old being killed, and that has got to be a serious concern. of the church. So I am saying at a regional level as a church and also in the community level with other organizations, we have a problem sometimes with working together with Catholics and Muslims and Hindus. We seem to have a real problem with that, and yet we can't do it alone. So we have got to merge our resources. I say merge our resources and forward march.
Dr. Greene, I know you spoke about school. There's one area I think I want to clip in here. It is that of our prison ministry, because the truth is, when we look at gang warfare and the growth of gang, number of gangs are formed behind bars. They form in the prison, and a lot of recruitment goes on behind bars. And we've seen in, let's say, Antigua, a number of the persons engaged in crime are repeated offenders. So we need to have a structure or program for folks when they are taken behind bars, when the law gets them and justice is served, so that when they get back into civil society, they do not come back out with reinforced behavior, more tactics and more knowledge as to how to commit crime. So there's a significant injection that needs to be done. Folks are saying, lock up the criminals. Yes, we should allow justice to meet them, but if they get behind bars and there is no rehabilitation program, that's the best place for them to gather together, for them to harness their skills and learn more criminal methods. So we need to have a program in the prison to deal with repeated offenders and the persons behind there. So in addition to the schools, I think prison ministry is critical in addressing this issue as well.
Dr. Greene, let me just say one thing, because I think I'm coming off now, but I think you all have 4 minutes to go. Let me just say what our school should have a strong vocational component, including USC. When USC started, that was the goal. So I am saying all of our schools, and if we do have a secondary school in a district, we could attempt to run a vocational training program to give young people the skills, they'll get the acquired resources to sustain themselves and their families. The vocational program.
Well, you know, our discussion today is really to provide awareness to people, because 1 hour cannot give us enough time. I mean, we need a whole month to talk about drugs, right? And maybe Pastor Dottin, I need to bring you back sometime when we can go into some of those research that you mentioned with respect to marijuana.
Sure, because I will be happy to.
Is so interesting, you know. But what I can conclude from today is, as my knowledge and understanding and experience with the church, as we agree that there are lots of structures in place. Unfortunately, many of our members do not appreciate the fact that we're called to serve. And there are too many members who still believe that their role is to come on Saturday mornings and be ministered to, and then they go home and that's the end of it. But Saturday morning is a worship service. Real church happens during the week. Real church happens when we live, we like to say, in the marketplace.
Exactly.
You know, and so that ministry that we are supposed to be performing, interacting with people who are caught in the stronghold of the devil, when we can go and rescue them. And this is my hope for our church. This is and I like the idea of the integration, the networking. You're correct. We get all kinds of pushback from all kinds of people, and I know other denominations get pushback from their members likewise. But we have to rise above these challenges so that we can make a positive difference in our societies. Now, I'm going to give you each a minute to wrap up, say your closing thought, because next week we have a different topic. So thank you so much for your contributions. We appreciate it. That's been meaningful. We want to we're going to look forward, Dr. Dottin, to that other discussion, but we will dialogue. Yes, but
so let me just say this.
Yes.
God has worked a miracle. That's why I'm still on. But let me say this, Dr. Doyle, let me just say this. I have started a program in a community in Tanakuna where we started COP with adopting one family that has 2 or 3 babies, and we are playing a significant role financially in the upkeep of those babies. Give them a fighting chance not to be involved in an intergenerational affair that their families have been involved in. Okay? So I just want to leave us with that. Let us start in our immediate communities and make a difference in one life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Doyle?
Yes, and I want to just join with Dr. Dottin by saying, let us start with being the solution. So let us as a church community strengthen our marriages, harness or increase or make positive our parental skills, so that as we train our children, they can develop strong, positive consciences and they can make positive decisions. I think the church is poised to benefit from what we have been preaching, what we've been teaching, but we must benefit as individuals, our family members, and then as we do that, then we can move into the community and help others out there to experience rehabilitation as we provide trust, we provide support for those who need it at this critical time.
Thank you so much to all of our viewers. We appreciate your presence with us this afternoon. We want to thank Dr. Dottin, he is now off, and Pastor Doyle for sharing from their wealth of experience with us this afternoon. We want you to encourage your friends to go back and listen to the information, listen to the one from last week. Next week, we're going to be back with another subject of interest. May God bless you until then.
Thank you.